Well, it's good to be with you again, and it's good to have Dave Newton, our Treasurer, with us for our annual meeting finance presentation. Hi, Dave.
Hi.
So why don't you start by telling us where we were back in September when we had our last annual meeting?
Okay, what I've got here is the slide that I used then. What we do is turn the what can be huge figures in the annual accounts into what it amounts to per week. And what we're showing here are the main items of income and the main costs coming in. And when we were looking at this in September, of course, 2020 was a strange year, and some of our costs were under budget because the church was closed. We saved money on heating. There were some activities that we couldn't do, and also we lost some income. And when we were looking at this last year, the gap between the income that it looked like was coming in and the costs was about £650 a week. So quite a significant amount, and that was why we decided at that time to bring an appeal to the church family to see if we could do something about it.
So in September, we were facing that big hurdle of £650 a week of new giving needed to balance the year. Tell us what happened at the end of the year. Where did we get to by December?
Okay, well, it was really good news. So in terms of the actual numbers that are in the accounts, we had a super response from the congregation, and the giving went up, and the gift aid that came with that, and that meant that the amount that we were receiving went significantly up. On the cost side, there were some things that were higher than expected and some things lower, but actually overall the costs stayed the same, and by the magic of PowerPoint it rotates around, and we actually ended the year more or less in balance, in fact with a slight surplus. So it was absolutely wonderful result.
Yes, that's a fantastic news, isn't it? That we ended 2020 in our general fund with a very small surplus. And we just want to say thank you to everybody in the church family who gave over 2020, and particularly those of you who responded to the appeal at the end of November. Now, Renew has been the big story of 2020. So let's have a look at the Renew funding and particularly where we are right now in terms of the shortfall for Renew.
Okay. I think what I want to do is just look at the whole Renew project. The costs I've got here, 1.6 million. 1.5 million of that is the actual contract, the building costs, and that's the figure that you see in the brochures and everything else. But we've also, the PCC has authorised some additional spending on principally the audio-visual system and new carpets. And basically, it just makes a lot of sense to do the upgrades of these at this time. So we're talking about a total cost of 1.6 million. So where's that coming from? Some years ago, we'd sold a property, and we've got just over 600,000 for that. We've gone to the church family and had a fantastic response in terms of donations and pledges given during the pandemic. It's been a marvellous response. We've made transfers from other PCC funds, principally the Legacy Fund. There's the gift aid on the gifts and pledges that have been made. We've received one or two grants, and also the legacy from Bruce Williams has come here. Had a contribution from preschool of 25,000. We've also, as you'll know, we've been busy fundraising. At this point in the report, the fundraising is basically what was raised by the Promise auction. And there'll obviously be more funds coming in on that. And putting that all together, the shortfall at the time of writing the annual report is 137,000. This is a lot lower than the figures that we were talking about only a few months ago. It was more like 250,000. And in fact, we're receiving more donations and pledges all the time. And I think the current figure, if we were going to do it today, is more like about 115k. So it's coming down all the time.
Yeah, that's correct, 115k. And we're so grateful to every member of the church family who has given towards Renew. But Dave, obviously 115k in the scale of the 1.6 million is a small amount, but it's still a large amount of money to find. So how do we propose to plug that gap?
Okay. We've got a number of grant applications that have been in for some time, and adding those all up would be 350,000, which would be wonderful. We're not expecting to get all of those, but we are we're really hopeful that we'll get a good response, and the results of those grant applications will be known in the next few months. Fundraising is continuing, and Buy a Brick is coming through, and then we've got other plans for events through the rest of the year. As I said earlier, we are receiving new donations and pledges all the time, as people, and we're optimistic that when people see what's been done on the Renew project, that it will really get people excited. We need to have a backstop in place, and if there is still money outstanding in November, we've made arrangements that we can take out a loan with Methodist Chapel Aid at 3%. So that's not something that we'd like to avoid if we can, but that's something that we have there if we need to. But our main aim will be to close that shortfall by the time we get to November.
Fantastic. Now, one of the implications of the Renew project has meant having a full audit this year rather than an independent examination. So let's look at that process, if we may.
Okay. Now, Mark knows all about the audit process in more gory detail than I do. I think this thing about a full audit, it's the first we've had since 2014, since we were allowed to have an independent examination, which is a rather less detailed process. A full audit involves, and I've used the word forensic, a really detailed examination of what we do, and they require documentary physical evidence in many cases for all the things that we put in the accounts. And the auditors have given unqualified approval to the financial statements, but there is one exception in respect of our giving to mission partners, so we need to talk about that.
Well, let's do that. Why don't you explain what a qualified audit report is and why we've received a qualified audit report on our mission giving?
So if you're not an accountant or interested in finances, you may want to look away now, but this really is important for the church family. So I just want to explain what we do and why this has raised an issue. In a long-standing way, we've supported mission partners, and we've done that through annual grants. And what we've done in recent years is that we've, as part of being more intentional and strategic about what we've done, we have given our mission partners an indication of our intentions for future years. However, unfortunately, in the way that we've done it and the way that we've communicated it, the auditors have seen that, and they regard it under SRP, which is the Statement of Recommended Practice. If I remember right, in what we've done, that they regard that as a financial commitment. So if we say we're going to make this giving over multiple years, according to the rules of the SRP, they say that we should account all of the expenditure in over those multiple years in the first year that the commitment was made. Yeah.
So that sounds like, just to explain that, that means that if we say made a commitment for 3 years to give £10,000 a year for 3 years, we would have to show £30,000 in the year that we made that commitment, rather than £10,000 a year.
That's right.
So why can't? What's wrong with doing that then? Why can't we just do that?
Well, yeah, we could do that, and I think when we looked at this, we talked to the auditors about this process. I think we had a number of problems with it. I think obviously, all other things being equal, we want to conform to the SORP. However, first thing is that in terms of what we do, we never intended to make some kind of binding commitment. Our model is that we are receiving income every year, but what we're doing is setting aside some of that for our mission partners. So what we give is totally dependent on what comes in terms of giving from the church family. So we weren't intending to make that a binding commitment. The second thing is that in doing this, it actually has a huge impact on what the numbers look like, and it becomes impossible to compare this year's accounts with last year's. And I think it's difficult enough explaining the accounts to people, but if we'd had to make this change, it really would have been, I think, quite difficult. I think the third thing is that the kind of thing that you're describing, where multiple years of expenditure all get telescoped into the first year, would actually mean that we'd be reporting very much lower reserves. In fact, in the annual report, we not only make a reference to 2020, but we also talk about what the balances were at the end of 2018 and 2019. So we'd have to recalculate those. And actually, the impact of all of these would be to actually send us into negative reserves. Now, I think none of this means we've got any less money in the bank. The money is all there in the bank, but that's what the accounts would show. And when we have a reserves policy which says we want to keep 150,000 or so in reserves, then actually showing only 5k reserves at the end of 2020, that creates a problem in terms of how we're going to deal with that and plan for the future. So there are lots of downsides of doing that, and in discussion with the auditors, the other option that we looked at was to say, well, we're going to depart from the SORP on this specific issue, so it's not 100% compliant, and that carries risks in terms of our reputation. But what we set out to do is to mitigate those risks by basically being very transparent. We set out in the annual report why this has arisen. It's a single issue. We've explained why we've done it, and also that it's an issue that we will be avoiding in future years. So we've been fully transparent about what we're doing and why, and this is the option that in the end the finance team recommended to the PCC, and it was adopted.
And it's probably worth saying, Dave, that our auditors who understand church finances, and in some cases our church treasurers themselves, have been very sympathetic to our desire to present the accounts in a way that makes sense from year to year. And it was partly their suggestion that we go down this route as an alternative to representing our accounts according to the SORP. So they have been very supportive of this approach. No,
I think it's they've been very, very constructive in all of this, and I think it's also worth adding that in all the other aspects of church finance, as I said earlier, it's been inspected forensically, and I think the church family should take comfort from the fact that this is the only issue that's been flagged in any way. the whole role did.
Wonderful. So we've got a couple of minutes left. Let's turn our attention to this coming year, 2021. What are the outcomes and challenges for this year?
Right. Well, we're in a situation, I mean, certainly planning was interesting because we're in a situation where things are still a bit uncertain. We're returning to full in-person activities, but quite how and when things will happen is still uncertain. We're all looking forward to getting back to what was good and we cherished from what before COVID. But I think there are new ways of church that we have been exploring, which some of which we want to hang on to. I think it's going to be wonderful that as we open up and return to church, we have a new church building to enjoy, and I think making the most of that is going to be really exciting. And generally speaking, we are still going to need to maintain our income and probably grow it. And we will need to continually carefully manage our costs. So we've got into 2021 with a balanced general fund, and that's what we want to do again in 21.
Wonderful. So Dave, we are so grateful for all you do for our finances and in chairing the finance team. And if people want to know more about our giving and how our finances work, that's the link. They can get in touch with us at giving@ccweb.org.uk or look at the website www.ccweb.org.uk/giving. Dave, thanks so much for sharing the finance update with us and for all you do to look after our finances.
You're very welcome.